in the central business district, I think Harry will back me up on this because we've discussed it many times. The facades on the buildings in our downtown area are, I think, the biggest downfall of our downtown.
That's what I was going to say. Exactly.
There's
not inviting.
Yeah, no continuity. They don't. It looks like they made it up as they went, and I think some continuity and some well-planned, appropriate refresh of the facades. And I don't know how you do it with all the private ownership, the different private ownership. Maybe you'd work on tax incentives as long as they put the money back into the facades, or however they do it, apply some of these grants. But a well thought out facade program downtown, I think, with everything else that we're trying to do, would change things immeasurably.
Oh yeah.
So that's where I would look first, truthfully.
So Phil, I was going to ask you, actually take that and kind of, I don't know if you just know, just in your general general knowledge, but I know the community development block grant funding for the facade program was something like, would be that funding source. I haven't seen it available recently, so I'm not sure if you've heard anything about that offhand, or if you know what I'm talking about.
I have not heard anything recently about that particular funding source for signage and facades. I would have to suspect that through this process, that's going to be something that really stands out across these 119 communities for DHCD, and so that might be something that galvanizes them to look at other funding opportunities for that. Just as we were walking around, we were noting some of those same things, particularly related to the signage of the businesses. There aren't, most signs are flat against the building wall. So if you're driving by, or even as a pedestrian on the sidewalk, you don't really know what's up ahead until you're right next to it. So you don't know if you're 2 doors down from a really great restaurant because you can't read the sign.
Right.
That's a town meeting issue. I think that's a bylaw, isn't it?
So that would be, probably it's under the signage regulations, which are within zoning. And so as part of our assessment, we'll take a look at that and we can flag that. If blade signs, the signs that kind of project out, that hang out over the sidewalk, aren't allowed in the signage regulations, that's, I think, something we would flag, because from a business perspective, a business environment, those types of signs, with the proper regulation, of course, can really improve visibility for businesses. So that's exactly an example that would fall kind of under the regulatory and administrative section of the analysis. But that's a perfect example of it.
And having better visibility into the spaces too, and more glass, or there's places down there that have shades down front for sun. It's like, so you don't know what's inside, or they don't have enough windows.
Yeah, those are all all part of the business environment, part of what makes it appealing to walk through some downtowns where you can window shop and get a sense of if what is the bakery just pulling out of the oven, or are there a lot of other people there? People in a store, in a restaurant, are some of the best advertising for those places. But if you can't see inside, or if you're not sure, unless you're particularly adventurous, you're probably not going to go in. So those are all great points.
Phil, in your experience in a facade, someone that has actually acted on a facade program, I think one of the biggest issues that we've run into in Walpole, and I'm assuming it's everywhere, but I'm hoping that you have some insight or some best practices as to how you get around the multiple building owners that may, some may be less incentivized to do anything because they don't care. I don't live here. That's just my building. I'm in Florida, and I could care less what it looks like. How do you incentivize, or I don't even know what the word is, because anybody that knows me knows that I was going to say force, but I don't like when the town forces anything on anybody. So how do you incentivize these building owners to get on board with a program like this?
That's a great question. I think it's not an uncommon struggle. Some of it is how you structure the program, and there you want to be careful and balance it to make sure you're using the funds wisely. But if there's a difference between obviously grants, loans, and loan side, is it a low interest loan? Is it a forgivable loan of some percentage? Those are all different sort of financial incentives that might make it more appealing for a business owner or a building owner. And it's also looking then at the flip side, kind of enforcement of, depending just how bad it is, are there enforceable property code conditions that, could be looked at relative to just, the overall condition. And that's, for buildings that are pretty far gone for the most part. But, those are some things. And, if an issue, around the signage and wayfinding issue, or signage and facade issue, if this really rises up to the top and it seems like it is an important one, this is an example of something where we could reach out to a subject matter expert who's designed programs like this, who can, give us more of that information on how do you make this an effective program. So those are things that we'll be working on in phases 2 and 3, is to tap those experts to help us with these issues.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you.
Phil, we have a weekly newspaper in town, and I was wondering whether you could design an article for submission that would perhaps get some support for people, including the building owners, and to look into the program and cooperate with us rather than having to go to them and sell the program.
Yeah, that's actually, if there's a local community paper, that's a great resource, and I think a great idea to put a little article in there. I think Sarah and Pat would be perfect to take the lead on that, to say Destination Downtown is this still pretty new organization. We're committed to Main Street. We're looking forward to working with businesses in the community, and we have this program opportunity from the Commonwealth that we're working on, so keep an eye out. But that's a great idea that we'll definitely share with Sarah.
So Phil, Kevin Spenley, I would second the motion of having some subsequent meetings or discussions with the EDC as a stakeholder. Just to get more into detail on this. One thing I'd be interested is, as the surveys come to completion, is understanding what's being told by those owners. But
yes,
however you guys wanted to move forward, I think that would make a lot of sense to better understand this, and then come in as stakeholders on some recommendations.
Yes, absolutely. Everything that we collect in phase 1, we'll put together into more easily digestible format, and we'll definitely share that. And the survey results will be they're actually being analyzed just by one firm who's running the whole survey operation. And so they'll be able to provide those results back to us, but also to you, so you can hear directly from those business owners and have a sense of what they feel are their biggest needs or the roadblocks they're constantly running into. And I think the idea of a follow-up conversation with this group, this was a lot to take in and try to respond to in one meeting. So if you have a little more time to think about this, we could certainly schedule a follow-up, like Pat said, a working meeting or something, to kind of continue this conversation, especially as we sort of are bringing phase 1 to a close. We have all that data. We can, present that back and talk more about it.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. Obviously, to take what we've gone over today, and I know we have a few members that were unable to join us today. So if we can, obviously I'll probably reach out to them to get them either to the copy or the recording of this meeting, as well as the presentation Phil had done for us, and look into scheduling the stakeholder meeting with the group to just kind of go over what we went over today.
Excellent.
Great. Well, I've probably taken enough of your agenda for tonight's meeting. I want to thank you again very much for your time tonight. Really appreciate it. Very excited to be working with Pat and Sarah and working in Walpole on this. I think it's it's actually, I mean, at a kind of a national level, it's very exciting that Massachusetts is, implementing this program and working with communities of all different sizes to figure out how to come back stronger out of this pandemic. So we are looking forward to continuing this work. We'll definitely be in touch over the next few months. And again, there will be, not just opportunities specifically with the EDC, but also, public opportunities as well to learn about, the information we're collecting, the potential recommendations, and get feedback and sort of shape those as well. So thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, I thought that was very informative. Hopefully they can come up with some projects that we can really sink our teeth into. But again, my point being, looking at past history, hoping we can take the next step after the recommendations are in. That's the key. I've seen a lot of recommendations, heard a lot of great ideas, seen the town pay for a lot of studies, and we still got the same downtown, the same traffic, the same parking, the same sidewalks, the same everything. So, proof is in the pudding. I'm sure he'll be able to come up with some really good suggestions. He seems like a very serious and detailed person, so I'm sure there won't be many questions about what needs to be done and how. So we'll just have to stay on the different stakeholders and see who can make the funding happen and get moving on it. So I think we ought to skip the Main Street Live discussion for two reasons. With Danelle and Beth not being present, they're big players in that, and so I think we ought to push that off to the next meeting. And we're running a little late, so what I would like to, Pat, if you could, do you mind going through, do you have the time to go through some of the department updates, maybe the key ones?
Yeah, absolutely. So one that I definitely want to touch on tonight is going over the master plan update. So the town has made their decision in terms of a consultant. The Board of Selectmen took the recommendation from the selection committee to award the contract to the Barrett Planning Group. So we're beginning the process right now of working on the composition of that initial master plan steering committee. That will have to go before the Board of Selectmen to kind of certify what that makeup will be. And we're hoping to have our first kickoff meeting probably by May 11th or so. So one of the recommendations that both myself and the Assistant Town Administrator Pat Shield had was at least one member of the EDC being involved in that committee. And so everything kind of obviously, our recommendation was a 9-member committee, and it was broken down to representatives from a few existing boards. But obviously, we want to hear what the select board has in mind in terms of how they want that committee to be made up. If they want any more at-large members to be involved. I know that the previous master plan, there was, I think, over 20 or so different members. So I'm not sure if that's the same.
Wow.
If that would be the same mindset for this update. I think initially we wanted to keep something that was a little bit more manageable. But obviously, we want to hear from the selectmen in terms of how they want that composition to be. So we're excited to move forward with that. I mean, that's going to be a pretty big undertaking for the next year or so. In addition to that, I just want to mention, so the town has received housing choice designation. So this is kind of a newer program through DHCD that basically identifies communities that have seen substantial housing growth within 5 years. There's two different ways to receive designation. You either have seen 300 or more units, you ever seen at least 300 units with up to 7 best practices within 5 years, or you've had 500 or more units within 5 years. So the town of Walpole has actually had about 700 units within 5 years, which we more than exceeded their necessary requirements to receive designation. So what this means is that the town of Walpole for the next 2 years is kind of locked in with being eligible to apply for certain capital grants. So these are grants in terms of infrastructure, whether it's actual the money going towards the completion of the project or some of the I should say engineering work involved with the project that has to do with housing. So what that can mean is whether it's a sewer or water utility upgrades involving a larger housing complex like we may have seen at at Liberty Station or Union West, or we could think of something more kind of nuanced in terms of streetscape improvements that may kind of coincide within the downtown, that may coincide with both existing housing as well as economic development in that region. So it's kind of it's a great opportunity to be within such a small group that is eligible for these capital grants. So I definitely want to take the time to look into this, talk to both, town administration and DPW and kind of figure out, is this something that that we could tackle this year, or is it something that we might need to take a little more time with and tackle next year? But it's a great opportunity that, obviously with the amount of growth that has happened in Walpole, to be eligible to kind of use that to take a look at our infrastructure and see what we can improve that might be impacted due to some of that housing growth. So
did you say that there's only a 2-year period to apply for those grants?
Yeah, so it is kind of a short turnaround where you're not just locked in and you're there. You do have 2 years to basically reapply. Obviously, I think if you're out within 2 years and you didn't apply for a capital grant, you can reapply to go back and receive designation if you've been growing. Like I said, the threshold to apply is basically either 300 units within 5 years with a few different best practices involved, or 500 more units. So hypothetically, if in 2 years, say we were able to apply to get a grant, but then we're out of the program, we could reapply to receive designation and be in the program again. So that's just the way they wrote it. So it is kind of just one of those caveats to it, is that it's great to receive designation, but we obviously want to do something with it. We want to be able to actually put that money towards towards a capital grant.
Do you have any thoughts as to what we might need?
Well, that's the thing. I applied for this just talking with the Housing Partnership Committee. I know this is something that they wanted to look into, especially with the town's recent growth. But these sort of projects, I would like to kind of put this more or less have a discussion with DPW, and they are kind of the experts in terms of what the town needs infrastructure wise. And this kind of also folds into one of my next discussion items, which is a community one-stop for growth. So what the state did is basically they looked at a few different grant programs and tried to find a more streamlined process in terms of applying for them. So before, the redundancy is you may have a project and you may apply for multiple grants for that project. What the state did is kind of look at a process now where you will apply to kind of this online platform with your project in mind, and it may be applicable to receive funding from multiple grant programs. So there may be an existing project in mind that may be eligible to receive funding through a housing choice capital grant now that we're eligible for it, but there may be also an additional grant program that we could also look into utilizing as well. So it was a great idea by the state to kind of not only just streamline the process, but you kind of, I wouldn't say get more bang for the buck, but you instead of just reapplying for the same grant programs every few months, to take a look at, there's about, I think, 9 or so different programs, both through Mass Development, DHCD, and see now if we have a project in mind, we apply based on the project, not so much just on the grant. So that's something that is due by June 4th, and so that's something obviously I'd love to be able to utilize that program the first year out, just because I think it's with both the housing choice designation and just the litany of options that this One Stop for Growth application portal has. It's a really good opportunity to receive funding from multiple different grant programs. So, or at least you have a better idea. If you have one grant program in mind, you could always just kind of tee up your application towards that one grant program. But it's great to have more eyes from different state agencies look on your project and kind of guide you towards what existing grant program would be the most fitting for it. So that's something I think I mentioned. I think it's due June 4th. So I'd like to take a deeper dive into that and over the next few weeks. Outdoor dining. I may have mentioned last meeting as well, but we kind of officially opened up, so to speak, on April 1st in terms of allowing for outdoor dining. The process is similar to what the town did last year with their online permitting software. So that's something that I notified most restaurants that had applied last year that to re-up for this year, and so we have had about 6 or so that have been approved, a few of them that are kind of being reviewed currently. So optimistic. Obviously last year, due to the state guidelines, we couldn't, most restaurants couldn't get going until June. We had to stay close to June. So being able to open up earlier this year, any more, the more months you can get outside, the better, just, for the businesses, but also just, from the town's perspective, it's a great way to kind of get that visual impact of when you drive around downtown to see people outside. That is incredibly beneficial to getting that foot traffic, to getting more of that kind of that vibrant atmosphere that you want. So I mean, obviously, it's twofold. The benefit definitely benefits the businesses, but obviously we're trying to create the appeal of the downtown. And so that certainly helps. Few other things. I know we already touched on the local rapid recovery grant. Main Street Live we'll go over a little bit more next time. Beth and Donnell are here. I will just say on that that we did have our subcommittee meeting, and then follow that up with a meeting with department heads. So that was it was definitely beneficial. I think to get going early on this. And right now because it's been done previously, it's been done successfully previously. So I know Donnell and Beth and everyone that's involved with that, Mark, and you guys have a great process in mind and know what you're doing in terms of running this event successfully. The one thing I think we just obviously need to keep in mind with that is where the state is with outdoor gathering guidelines. If this is going to be held tomorrow, it wouldn't be able to happen realistically. But obviously, if we're looking at a potential September 17th date, being optimistic, hoping things are starting to be a little bit more relaxed by the time we get to the late summer, early fall. So going under the guides, we're kind of working with the premise right now that things will hopefully get a little bit better. They've already gotten better, but obviously, this is an event where it's kind of hard to manage who's here, who's not. When you got a lot of people, using a public space in that manner.
Yeah.
So we definitely want that to be relaxed. And it kind of on a somewhat similar note, I've been talking to a group that ran the Juneteenth event last year. I guess it's a celebration for the Abolition Day, so to speak. So the Emancipation Day. So they ran the event last year successfully and kind of on a small scale. This year they're hoping to increase it somewhat to kind of utilize both ends of the common where it's broken up. And so that right now is it's a great idea, and it's also going to be interesting to see. One, they still have to meet with the select board to seek approval to utilize public space, but also how an event like that goes off and works during outdoor gathering regulations. It would be kind of interesting to see how they manage that and what goes into something like that. Shared streets and spaces. So this is, I know Mark, you had mentioned too, like if you come out with a great idea, it's like, ideas are great, but how do you actually fund them? This was a grant that I know I utilized last year in Norwood, and I know Ashley used this year, or this past summer to purchase materials to try to encourage outdoor use of spaces, whether it was utilizing, I think Ashley had purchased materials to conduct public events on the town common. There were picnic tables, I believe, that are out there currently. There's some other cafe tables, some tents, a few other supplies that Ashley had purchased, and I don't know if she got to use all of them, but there is funding remaining from that grant project, and so I'm just working on trying to utilize the rest of that funding. I think she got basically $15,000 last year, and there's about $2,700 remaining. So it's obviously a small change in the great scheme of things, but it's money that I don't want to give back to Mass DOT. So I want to use it for purposes especially for outdoor seating, or maybe something that could coincide with a program or recommendation that we get from the local rapid recovery planning grant. If it's a smaller scale project that may need funding, the whole goal of the Shared Streets and Spaces grant is to look at spaces of pedestrian traffic, or look at town ways and kind of think of a reuse of them. So a good example is like communities that may have closed streets, or communities that looked at extending sidewalks to kind of create new outdoor dining spaces or gathering spaces. So it's it's a great program that I really hope comes back this summer, because it's usually a fair amount of funding available to kind of do these these certainly kind of different approaches to kind of trying to create vibrancy in your community and trying to activate spaces. I think that's the word that Phil used in terms of looking at underutilized locations in a downtown setting and trying to kind of create something there that garners public interest. So fingers crossed that program comes back, because it was definitely well received last year. In addition to that, I did do an update on some of the 40B housing projects. If anyone has any questions specifically to anything like that, or anything else I had said, I'll take any questions.
No? I think we're good.
All right. Yeah. I tried to go as fast as I could.
No, Pat, that's great. I'm telling you, it's very thorough, and it's much appreciated after what we've gone through over the last, long before COVID. We've prior to Ashley, we didn't have a lot of direction and focus, and Ashley did a great job, but then they stretched her too thin. So it's actually good to have issues to contend with, and I think I can speak for everybody on this committee that it feels good to have something to do, as opposed to just sitting around talking about what we should be doing. So that's great, and I really appreciate all the hard work that obviously and clearly has gone into this.
Thank you.
Before we end the meeting, we do have a new member, Dan O'Driscoll. And Dan, if you don't mind, I wish we had everybody here, but could you just give us a brief overview of, what made you decide to want to join the committee, and a little bit of a bio, a little background?
Sure. So I've always been involved, ever since I was in student council. I was on the school committee in high school. I was president of my student government in college. And then I got into higher education. I graduated with an accounting degree, but got into higher education and involved in a lot of strategic planning and sort of how to make things work at an institution that's tuition driven, but needs public-private partnerships and looking at growth and retention and building in those things. My wife and I have lived here for about 7 years, and I'm just interested in giving back to my community because I live here. I think the same thing when I drive down Main Street, like, wow, what an opportunity. So I really wanted to see how I could help, and also give back and do what I can to provide my input.
No, that's great. We really appreciate it, and we're really glad to have you.
Yeah, welcome.
Thanks. Thanks. Any questions?
I'm sure the select board.
I think I was late on their agenda. They're like, okay.
Yeah. And I've said this before, but we have 3 associate seats, I think, still open. Is that correct, Pat?
I believe you are correct. Actually, 4 vacancies for associate members.
So if anybody knows anyone that might be interested in just, dipping their toe in the water, there's, as an associate member, you don't vote, and it's only I think it's a 1-year term, right, Pat, for associate, or is it 3?
That I'll have to get back to you on. I'm not.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. But again, it's a way to get your, some people might be interested, but they don't want to fully commit. And some of the associate members that I've met over the years have been very, very helpful, very productive, and they either move into a full member or they, move on to other positions within the town government boards and committees. So it's a great way to get your foot in the door. And Dan, we're glad to have you. But again, if anybody knows anyone else that might be interested in those associate positions, please recommend them to apply with the select board. A full board can get very, very productive, and that's our goal this year, is to really maximize our influence in the town and do a good job. So if no one has anything else, we're not going to vote the minutes either, I don't think, right? Because I don't think we have a quorum. Do we have one?
No, yeah, actually.
We don't, because Dan would have to abstain because he doesn't.
Because he wasn't there. Yeah.
He wasn't there. So why don't we put off, and we'll vote the minutes at the next meeting as well.
Okay.
So anybody want to make a motion to close the meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to have one last comment.
Sure.
I know we talked about doing a more of a kind of like a stakeholder meeting and thinking about the downtown and having the board kind of review. I'll probably send out an email either later this week or sometimes next week to kind of think about having more of a short focused meeting with Phil to kind of go over what we talked about in terms of looking into the downtown and kind of expanding on our discussion that we got into.
Yeah, that sounds great. I look forward to seeing it.
Yep.
And also maybe an overview as to, we don't know yet what the select board's looking for with the master plan steering committee, right?
I will let you, that's another thing too. So if that is voted upon as is, there would be an economic development committee representative. So the select board is meeting on April 20th. And so I will probably notify this board immediately afterwards in terms of what that composition would be and if a EDC member is required or needed. And then obviously,
should I jump on that meeting as chair just to, if they are asking about the need or relevance of an EDC member on that committee?
Yeah, I'll follow that up with Pat Shield in terms of what he thinks and with.
Yeah, I don't care which member it is, but I do believe that an EDC member should be part of that steering committee.
Yeah.
So, All right, cool. Well, I look forward to seeing the stuff you're going to send. Ken, you were going to make that motion?
Yes, I move we adjourn.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Dane? Dan, nice to see you. We'll see you next
You too.
time.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for all the help.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.